All right. Hello. Welcome to our Atlassian event for Atlassian community event for Vancouver for December. We're very pleased to be able to have with us Vish from Revyz. Is that how to pronounce it properly?
Revyz.
Revyz. All right, there. That makes sense. All right. Who's going to be sharing some details in terms of how to keep our data safe in the cloud environment. So uh, we'll go ahead and take it away, and we'll help see what we have in terms of questions afterwards.
Sure thing. Thank you, Brendan and Frida. Thank you for setting this up. Appreciate you inviting me to talk to your community about SaaS shared responsibility. Let me share my screen. I have a couple slides to. Okay. Slideshow. There we go. All right. Just to introduce myself, my name is Vish Reddy. I'm part of Revyz. Going to be talking to you today about SaaS shared responsibility model and what are some of the strategies which you could be using to protect your cloud data. Okay, with that, I think 4 topics of discussion today. Who is responsible for data in a SaaS application? What is the shared responsibility model? And what are some of the strategies which you could deploy for protecting your data in a SaaS environment? And then last, we'll just briefly talk about how Revyz can help. All right, I guess first question, who is responsible for data in SaaS? I think the obvious answer is it is the cloud, right? I think anything which is sitting in the cloud, everything is good. I think most of us know that if we are using an AWS or Azure, Google Cloud, there are 3 copies of our data which are made in that data center, right? Because of there could be hardware failures, data center failures, whatever the case may be. All the cloud public cloud vendors would at least be making 3 copies of our data. So in that scenario, who is responsible for any data loss? Is it still me as the user, or is it the provider of the application? This is a screenshot from the Atlassian community pages. I'm sure even you've seen these questions come across. I think at least I've seen every so often, maybe once or twice a week, you'll see questions like this: how to recover deleted issues, how to restore deleted issues, and so on. So, with that in mind, I just want to bring up a survey which was done by the Enterprise Strategy Group on what are the top causes for SaaS data loss. Based on the survey which they did, they find that more than 50% of data loss in SaaS is due to deletion. Now, deletion of data could be due to multiple different reasons. That's what they've broken it down further. Accidental deletion being probably one of the top causes, followed by malicious deletion. Malicious deletion could be a malicious insider or a malicious outsider. Obviously, a lot of us are aware of what is going on in the cyber threat landscape. Ransomware incidents are going up, but of course, not many of us talk about it because I think that is something which nobody wants to disclose out. But I think the general trend has been over the years. There have been more increased ransomware type of incidents or even account takeovers. In the context of Atlassian, an account takeover would be more pertinent. As most of you all know, ransomware is more about taking your data, encrypting it, and then holding it ransom. In the case of an application such as Atlassian's Jira, Confluence, and so on, there it is more of a bad actor taking over your account and then potentially changing the data or deleting the data. I think that's where the malicious outsider comes into play. Of course, there are other reasons for data deletions too. There could be data corruption. Data corruption could occur due to multiple reasons. There could be misunderstanding of retention policies and so on. Now, I think one of the lenses which one needs to put in place is in understanding what is the impact of that SaaS data loss. You know, from what we discussed earlier, the data could be deleted in your SaaS environment by various methods, as we talked about. Now, what is the impact of that loss of that data? I think, again, specifically talking about Atlassian applications, be it Jira or Confluence, I think the question to ask yourself is, what type of data are you storing in your Jira application and your Confluence application? Like, what would happen if you don't have access to certain types of information which you have out there? At least from what I've seen so far, I've seen customers use Jira and Confluence in various different manners. It's not uh, limited to only software development teams, but it could be used by um, HR teams, legal teams, finance teams. Again, if you're a SOC 2 certified organization, then all your change management data is residing within your Atlassian Jira, and potentially all your documentation is sitting there in Confluence. Um, so I think the impact depends on how you're using these products or these tools to manage what type of data. From what has been seen, again, based on surveys from analysts, the cost of data loss, uh, again, could vary. Again, depends on the type of information which you're putting in these applications. Could be, as little as $8,000 per hour for small businesses, going up to $700,000 an hour for enterprises. Again, it's pretty simple, very simplistic way to look at it. Obviously, there are a lot of details associated with it. If you think about, you need access to some information, and your team is blocked by not having access to that information. What does that mean? Again, a simple way to look at it: productivity, cost of per hour for a person being blocked or a team being blocked. You could sort of extrapolate what that means for your business. Obviously, there's productivity loss, and again, depending on the type of information which you've lost, there could be, compliance and other regulatory related fines which could also be impacting. Again, it really depends on what you're storing within these applications. Now, this is a picture which I think a lot of you all might have seen. I think, as things have evolved over the years, one of the things which we are all probably pretty familiar with is having all your infrastructure on premises. Be it your compute, networking, the physical uh, 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 setup itself, be it your own data center. You had full control of all the things within that building, that data center. Which means, you as the admin or the app owner are pretty much responsible, or your company is responsible for the entire stack. Now, what we have seen over the course of many years is there's been a lot of innovation, wherein that responsibility or that ownership has been slowly been going away to service providers. If we go to the other extreme, which is what we are talking about, is about SaaS applications. And in the case of SaaS applications, it is essentially you, as the owner of the app or the administrator of that particular application, you're responsible for the data which is being put into that application. All the other pieces of the stack, be it the operating system, the actual machines which are running that application, the storage and the networking required, and even the physical data center where that machine resides, that becomes the responsibility of the SaaS or the SaaS application provider. In the context of Atlassian is responsible for the upkeep of the application, the machines which are running that application, the data center where that application is running, the security of the data center, and so on and so forth. So what remains is the responsibility with regards to the data which is residing in that application. That becomes your responsibility. Now, this is not anything unique with Atlassian per se. This is the same model which is followed by Microsoft or Salesforce, any of the SaaS application vendors out there. I mean, it essentially comes down to three to four things which you're responsible for in the SaaS world. Understanding who has access to that SaaS application. You want to make sure that the users who have access to the SaaS applications are, in fact, the users whom you want to have access to that SaaS application. Second is they have the right permissions, they have the right roles so that they can they have the right level of access within that application. Third, I would say, is ensuring that the devices from which the SaaS application is being accessed have the basic security and hygiene in place, because you don't want unsecured machines accessing your enterprise SaaS applications. And then lastly, the information which is being put in the SaaS application is being protected by you. We'll talk about what that means in the next slide. And as I mentioned, this is true with be it Microsoft Office 365, which is pretty popular in the enterprise, or take an application like Salesforce. The same model applies. Now, when it comes to Atlassian, again, the principles remain the same. I think the only addition which Atlassian adds in is with regards to marketplace apps. So maybe let me go over the four key things when it comes to the Atlassian shared responsibilities, the responsibilities which you have as the app owner, or if you're the administrator for that application, the four things which you need to keep in mind. Number one, you need to make sure that the data is which you're putting into the Atlassian platform for Jira, Confluence, or JSM, irrespective of which application it is suitable for you to for your usage model, and you are in compliance with the laws of the land where you're operating from. Second, making sure that the devices or the endpoints which are accessing those applications living in the cloud are secure and have follow good security practices. Meaning, you have the necessary security tools in place. You have your the endpoints are up to date in terms of OS patches and so on and so forth. Third is ensuring that the users who need to have access to the SaaS applications are the right ones, per the policies of your organization, and they have the appropriate access. Meaning, you should always think about following the from an access perspective, providing the least access needed to a given user. Obviously, everybody does not need to be an admin, which means the permissions which they have and what they can do within the applications are limited to what they really need to. From an information perspective, this is something which is critical, which is you have to back up the data which you add into the SaaS application. That is your responsibility. Lastly, again, this is more in context with regards to Atlassian, is if you're using any add-ons from the Atlassian marketplace, make sure that you assess the suitability of those applications for yourself. And if you see any malicious behavior, then you report it back to the Atlassian marketplace so that they can take the appropriate actions. So these are the 4 or 5 things which are critical from a shared responsibility perspective. All the other pieces, if I go back to the previous slide which we were talking about, all the other pieces about patching up the operating system where the application is running, maintaining the machines, the physical security. All of that becomes the responsibility of Atlassian. I would encourage each of y'all to go look at the shared cloud shared security shared responsibilities document which Atlassian has got. It's a really good doc which they've put up on the Atlassian website. Just search for shared responsibilities Atlassian, and you'll hit the white paper which they've put out, which again clearly calls out what your responsibilities are as the app owner or administrator. Now, one of the misconceptions which a lot of people have is, it goes back to the first question which I had for the audience out here, which is who's responsible for the data? What happens when data is lost in the cloud? While Atlassian is responsible for all the infrastructure, and they do take regular backups and so on, their responsibility is in making sure that the application is up and running and the infrastructure is up and running according to the SLAs which they publish. They do not use the backups which they take from an infrastructure perspective to revert back any data loss which you may have. Again, this is clearly documented in the shared responsibilities document, as well as the security practices what Atlassian follows. Now, with that in mind, I think it's probably good to put into context, what is the frequency or, again, responsibility of the different types of errors or data loss scenarios which you can run into. Starting off on the right side, again, going back to the survey which I'd shared, I think the most frequent vector for data loss is deletion, and within deletion, I think human error is probably the biggest cause, and that is the responsibility of you as the owner of the app, or the administrator. If you're importing, again, data imports also sometimes could cause loss of data because you might be overwriting something. Obviously, malicious deletions, again, the frequency of these types of events occurring is much lower, but they do occur, and those are some of the things which you need to take into consideration as you think about your data protection strategy. Now that you understand that protecting your data is your responsibility, these are some of the things that you want to take into account. What are the different types of disasters which could occur, and how do you go about thinking about protecting the data which is residing within the SaaS application. Now, when it comes to Atlassian, I think there are at least five broad categories of data loss. I'll start off from the bottom. Accidental data deletion. Again, if you're deleting, if attachments get deleted accidentally or issues get deleted accidentally, those are the points when that piece of information or data gets lost or is gone forever instantaneously. On the other hand, if you're deleting a project goes into a recycle bin within your Jira or Confluence, and it sits there for 60 days, after which it gets automatically deleted. Bulk changes could also be a source of data loss. Again, not having misplaced statuses, and there are different scenarios when you do a bulk change which could lead to a data loss. Those are again immediate. You lose that information instantaneously. There are also been cases where configuration changes could cause loss of data which already exists in the system. And then the other two things, which you have talked about, account takeovers and insider attacks. Those are again vectors from which your data loss could be instantaneous. I just want to give you a sense of what could be the scope or what could be the exposure in terms of data loss. Again, depends on uh, you know who is the person within your Jira Confluence environment who's taking that action. If you're the site admin, obviously the scope is going to be across the entire site. Project admin, it's sort of limited to the projects the project admin has access to and the corresponding configuration, because that is the scope to which they have access to make changes. Users, obviously, assuming that the principle of least privileges is being followed, users typically have the least amount of access. So that is limited to potentially the comments which they put in, or the attachments which they're adding into any data which they are generating, that typically they get the access to go and modify it or change it. And then, of course, automation rules which may be in place, again, depending on the permissions which have been given. Yeah, things could vary. So with that in mind, what are the different things which you could be doing to protect your data? I think there are 4 different strategies which could be followed. Do nothing is also probably a strategy. Again, it all depends on how critical your data is, right? Again, if it is not that critical, then maybe that's okay. Again, it all depends on where how your organization is using these different SaaS applications. The second one is access management controls. This is something which we talked about earlier, which is following the principle of least privileges. You ensure that only you provide the access permissions to the level which that particular user requires. You do not give more. But even in that scenario, even if you try to lock down your privileges and permissions, still the risk of data loss is high, because imagine the scenario where your project admin or the site admin's account gets taken over, or they accidentally go fat finger something. And so while it reduces the overall impact, or the risk rather, but still it is a valid vector, something to take into consideration as you think about various different strategies. Third is I would say exporting data, doing CSV exports. Again, this is more specific to Jira. Obviously, exporting CSVs from the various projects you have, it's potentially a manual process. You could potentially go and automate it using some of the APIs which are out there. Some are published, and some are unpublished APIs which you could use for building that out if you want to automate such a thing. But then the data coverage could be limited. Obviously, you can't export out attachments. Some of the data objects within Jira can't be exported out using the CSV export mechanism. And then from a restoration perspective, so backing up data is one thing, which is good, but then you should be able to restore that information back. Now, one of the benefits of I would say a CSV export is you can restore information back in a very granular manner. You can go look through the CSV file and say, look, you lost certain records. You can just put back only those specific records. You don't have to put back the entire CSV file. Of course, there's some amount of manual work involved, but potentially it's much more under your control. When using a CSV exported data to restore things back, you don't necessarily lose data while that when you upload that CSV file. And what I mean by that is, imagine a scenario where you've taken a CSV export on November 1st, right? And then on November, let's say 15th, you figure out, one of the users or the administrators comes back and says, hey, I lost this ticket. Could you restore it back? So if you had a CSV export, then you could at least get the, some of the basic information about the ticket back up. You can just restore that one ticket back in, which means you are not necessarily overwriting any of the existing data which is already there in your system. And that's what I mean by restore data loss. So you could, if you can granularly restore things back, you sort of avoid that restore data loss. Also, your system is fully accessible during the time when you're restoring that one or two tickets, whatever that number may be. Your system is not down, meaning your users can still access all the projects and so on. Now let's talk about database exports. This is the mechanism which Atlassian provides. You can go into the backup manager, I think that's what it's called. You can go and create an XML file, which is essentially your database. It's a dump of your, all the information which is there in that database. Again, this is a manual step. You can automate it using unpublished APIs. I think that is something which I think some folks have done. Given that the format in which the data gets written out is not easily searchable, you can't catalog what is there inside that database in an easy manner, unless you have some tool which can go parse out that entire XML file. It's hard to go and catalog what is inside it. All the objects, or I shouldn't say all, maybe I should say majority of the objects within your Jira application get backed up in this method. So I would say among all the different methods which are there for backing up your data, probably the database export method is probably a lot more comprehensive. Now there are limitations. Now let's talk about what those limitations are. One is you can only export data out every 48 hours, every 2 days. Meaning Atlassian provides you a mechanism to export out issues and attachments. Obviously, if you want the entire data set, you can do it only every 48 hours. If you want only issues, then you can do it every 24 hours. Typically, you typically don't go and destroy your entire site, right? That rarely happens. I'm not saying it never happens. It does happen probably in some scenarios. Now, what you really need is a mechanism to restore things back in a very granular manner. What do I mean by granular manner? It could be as simple as you deleted an attachment, you just want that one attachment back, or you deleted a couple of issues, you want only those 5 or 10 issues which got deleted, or you wanted some comments back which got erased out. So in that scenario, if you're doing a database backup, as I mentioned, backup is easy, restore is the hard part. If you're doing a restore back, you will, with a database restore, it is all or nothing. Let me go back to the example which I was talking about earlier. You took a backup on November 1st, and November 15th, you figured that there was some amount of data which was lost. Now you want to recover that back. Now, if you go and take the snapshot which existed on November 1st, and if you try restoring that back, then you're essentially overwriting your existing database with to roll back to what existed on November 1st. That means any changes between November 1st and November 15th are lost, right? So that is, again, a drawback out here. Of course, you can restore the database back to another site, and then you try to extract the data. There's a lot of manual jugglery which you would have to do in that scenario. There will be a system downtime, because if you're doing a database restore, your users won't be able to access that system, during the period of time where you're going to be restoring the data back. The amount of time, again, it really depends on the volume of data. If you have, again, volume of data out here, it's sort of a twofold: number of issues which you have across your entire Jira site, and the volume of attachments which you have. I think those two would determine how long it would take for you to put data back into your existing site, or even put it in a different site. Given all of these things, I would categorize the loss of the risk for data loss to be medium, meaning, yes, you can get back some of it, but you may be ending up losing some of your data. But this method is among the ones which you have discussed thus far: access management control, CSV exports, and database exports. I think this would probably be the least riskiest. Now, lastly, let me talk about using backup as a service. Now, if you're using a third-party service for doing your backup, it's sort of automatic. You don't have to, you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to maintain the scripts. You can, or you don't have to do it manually. It is for the service to provide you that. Now, some of the characteristics which you want to look in, if you're thinking about backup as a service, is obviously, the process is automatic. You should be able to search for data among the different snapshots which you have, because that is critical, right? In the example which I gave earlier, November 1st to November 15th, you should be able to go and search for the specific pieces of information which you lost, and you should be able to put back that information back into your main tenant with the least amount of work to be done. Typically, with a backup as a service, there are no export limits, meaning there is no limitation on that you can only back up every 48 hours or every 24 hours. You can do it. You should be able to do it whenever you choose to. Restoration, again, it should be granular. You should be able to put back the specific pieces of information which you have lost, or which you want to replace rather. There should be no system downtime while this operation occurs, while the restore operation occurs. I think overall, if you are able to get a service which provides you with all these characteristics, meaning things are automated, you can restore things back in a granular manner, there is no system downtime, then the overall risk for data loss is pretty low. With that in mind, I'm going to get into the last part of today's presentation, which is talking about how Revyz can help you. We saw a gap out here with data protection, meaning it is a very manual process to back up your data. Of course, you can automate it. As I mentioned, you can use some of the unpublished APIs which are out there, and you can automate that process. It may work, may not work. Again, depends on the size of data which you need to back up, and multiple different factors. What we have built out is backup as a service, which helps you back up your data on a daily basis and on an on-demand basis. Your restores are very granular. I think what we have tried to do is have a user experience to be as native as possible to Atlassian, meaning the UI is very similar to what you use. It's very similar to your Jira UI. It has the search capabilities, and then of course you can perform unlimited number of backups and restores. The system does incremental backups, meaning your first backup may take a long time, but then all subsequent backups are very fast. So you can pretty much run a backup at on demand whenever you choose. I think with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, because that's all I had. And given that it is just Brendan and I, Brendan, questions for you. I know I went through the slides quickly.
We've got a few people in the audience there, but thank you for that. A lot of interesting food for thought. Um, I guess if you have any questions, we just post them in the general chat there. We've got a few minutes left, so um, I guess with all the backup there, is there a lot of or is there any concerns around add-on data? Because I know that tends to extend beyond sort of the core functionality of that's offered by Jira. But is that something that's uh, easy to do with all of those methods, or only a subset of those methods, or
Yeah, no, great question. Let me share my screen back. Let me pull that up and yeah, just give me a second. Okay. Yeah. So add-ons are a huge challenge, Brendan and team. So couple of things which I'd want to put in there with regards to add-ons. Now, if your add-on is actually creating custom fields within Jira and putting the information within those custom fields, then that data, if you do a CSV export or a database export or backup as a service, all three of them will capture that data, right? But if the add-on is storing the data back in their own cloud, which is probably mostly the case, a lot of the add-ons store data back in their cloud itself, cloud environment, and capturing that data as part of your backup is not possible today, unless the app vendor exposes out some sort of an API which allows you to pull that information out. But there is no standard method today. There is no standard way of building an app which addresses this type of a use case.
yeah,
And
no.
so
I find add-ons tend to not play quite so well with other add-ons and so on, but yeah.
right. Now, I think one of the things which maybe all of y'all as administrators and users, I think this is something which we should bring up with the Atlassian team. Is there a way we can have a standard framework? If you're an app, you should be able to do A, B, C, D. Adhere to. There should be some amount of standardization. I think the level of standardization which exists today, I think there's probably room for improvement out there.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions, or is there anything in the chat?
I don't see anything in the chat just yet. All right.
Yeah, this is my goal out here is to just bring up the awareness of this. So what I would suggest to everybody on the call, just search up shared responsibilities Atlassian on Google. You will hit the white paper which Atlassian has published on what are the things which you should what you should be thinking about, and I think that's step one. Step two, again, these are the different strategies. Again, after talking to many folks, these are the different strategies which I'm aware of. If somebody has got other ways of protecting your data, I would love to learn about that. And then third is if there are any questions, anything which I can help you with, I'm happy to help address that.
Okay. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I just want to thank Vish for coming out and sharing lots of interesting food for thought there. And thanks to those that have attended. We are hard at work at some events, including getting back to in-person events in the new year. But we'll have a steady mix of the virtual format does let us bring in people from around the world to share some of their knowledge and insight. So we'll keep doing that as well. So, all right. Thank you very much, and you all have a great day.